Hello everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for this Thursday's edition of Alaska Weather. Up first, kind of an information bit here. We've got Southeast Alaska weather zone realignment. Goes into effect the 13th of September. Less than a week now, and that's for the National Weather Service Juneau Forecast Office only, and it affects public and fire, but no marine zones. So it'll be transparent, or it should be transparent to most users. Just glancing at that map, it's kind of hard to see. I can see a couple of changes there, but nothing too earth-shattering. Anyway, it uses borough and census boundaries to help eliminate overwarning of National Weather Service alerts across Southeast Alaska. And for more detailed information, go to juneau.weather at noaa.gov, and you can ask questions, give comments, list concerns if you'd like. Next graphic here, high wind warning out for the Eastern Alaska Range from Deltana, from Delta southward, and that's for today through Friday afternoon. Looking at south winds, south to southwest winds, basically south winds, 40 miles an hour with gusts possibly as high as 70 miles per hour. You can see there the two channeled areas there from Black Rapids could see gusts 70 miles an hour down to Delta Junction, could see gusts of 50 miles an hour, and then the other one there along the Parks Highway from Denali Park, Healy, possibly seeing gusts to 71 miles per hour for peak gusts again through Friday afternoon. And of course, those stronger wind gusts could blow around unsecured objects, and tree limbs could be blown down. A few power outages may result. And from there, a flood watch is out for the Copper River Basin, southeast Prince William Sound, and northeast Prince William Sound from Thursday morning, currently out now, and will stay out through Saturday afternoon. Heaviest rain already starting and will last through tomorrow morning. And a flood watch means there's a potential for flooding. And so the time to move belongings to high ground is right now. And for the next graphic here, a flood watch also in effect for the Susitna Valley, Madanuska and Susitna Valley. 4 to 6 inches of rain possible for the Talkeetna Mountains, which is a fairly good amount for there. And that's so the flood watch is out. And again, that means the potential for flooding. It's not actually occurring yet, but it could occur. And the next graphic here, a wind advisory out for the Middle Tanana Valley. Again, currently out now and will continue out through Friday morning, till 4 a.m. Friday morning actually. So for tonight, 15 to 25 mile an hour winds, gusts to 40 miles per hour. Strongest winds across the summits north of Fairbanks. Looking for, let's see, Fairbanks there, looking on the map, looking for gusts to 30 miles an hour in the Fairbanks North Pole, Eielson Air Force Base area, as well as two rivers. Otherwise, in the higher elevated areas there, Murphy Dome, Cleary Summit, and Fox, 35 to 40 miles an hour. And from there, looking at peak wind gusts we've seen so far around southern Alaska, Alyeska Summit, 58 miles an hour. Cordova had a peak wind gust of 56 miles an hour, as well as Alyeska, Max Mountain Summit there, 55 miles an hour. And then near Potter's Marsh, Anchorage, at the 1,014 feet, had a 60 mile an hour wind gust. Otherwise, winds gusting Glen and Seward Highway Junction about 50 miles an hour. Rabbit Creek, Hillside, usual gusts there about 50 miles an hour as well. And now, finally, satellite imagery showing the storm into the southwest interior there, with the front pushing a lot of clouds into south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, and up into the central interior, staying dry up to the north. And then a small break behind that, and then the next system pushing clouds and some moisture into the central Aleutian areas, and that band of moisture extending back into the Russian Far East there. That a weaker system than the one affecting the mainland Alaska area currently. Otherwise, mostly dry over the southern panhandle today with some rain to the north, but the heaviest rainfall amounts occurred along the North Gulf Coast. Yakutat picking up about an inch in the last 12 hours. Also back towards Sleep Mute, southern Kuskokwim Valley, about an inch of rain falling there as well. And Iliamna, back near the frontal boundary, picked up 3/4 of an inch of rain, but rainfall amounts were lighter as you move north. McGrath had about a third of an inch of rain, while Cordova picked up over an inch of rain there on the North Gulf Coast. And you can see that moisture moving northward with a slight drift to the east of the whole pattern there. On the chart, there's a 995 millibar low over the Kuskokwim Delta, more or less, with the front pushing into Cook Inlet currently. Moisture moving northward there. Again, heaviest to the south, lighter to the north, cuts off up there toward the Brooks Range and on out to the Arctic coast. Dry day there. Also over the Panhandle, southern Panhandle, not seeing too much, and some rain up to the north there. Then that next weaker system coming into the western Bering Sea, we'll see tonight drop southeastward, and the front should drag some rain into the central and western Aleutians, with the warm front increasing rain chances for the Fox Islands as well as the Pribilofs late tonight, as that narrow ridge in between the two lows starts getting pinched off there. Westerly winds may be gusting 30 miles an hour into Bristol Bay in the Kuskokwim Delta as that low lifts northward a little bit there toward the lower Yukon River. Otherwise, rain heavy at times. Manuscus-Susitna Valley this evening and North Gulf Coast tonight into tomorrow, as well as the Copper River Basin. And then a band of moisture remaining along the north coast of the Panhandle. So just light precipitation expected with that feature. And for tomorrow, low kind of weekend splits into two centers now, one over toward Eagle, the other one hanging back toward the Seward Peninsula. Westerly flow keeps it cloudy and wet, occasionally wet here across southern Alaska. Kind of gusty winds through Cook Inlet. Again, gale warnings out for Cook Inlet. And pretty gusty winds there across the Copper River Basin, remaining out of the south. Could see gusts 30 to 40 miles an hour in the channeled areas. Stays wet for the North Gulf Coast, but with that weakening front pushing into the northern coast of the Panhandle, rainfall amounts will diminish, or the intensity will subside there for the North Gulf Coast, but there's a chance of precipitation across all of mainland Alaska at some point in the day tomorrow, as well as the central and southern Bering Sea. Kind of showery there for the eastern Aleutians, with the main rain area up toward the Pribilofs with that weak system there. And then back to the west, just off the Russian coast there, the next system we'll see develops a little bit and moves the front and begins to spread rain in toward the southwest coast late in the day, with winds picking up from the south and southeast. Definitely rain, warm front rain into the Alaska Peninsula, and cold front rain into the central Aleutians and Pribilof Islands. Otherwise, much of interior Alaska, especially the central areas from the Brooks Range down to Kodiak Island, will be mostly cloudy with showers or areas of light rain, especially along those trough axes and isolated showers eastern North Gulf Coast, partly and mostly sunny over the southern Panhandle, as well as could see some sun breaks, Yukon Delta, Seward Peninsula, western North Slope, and Arctic Coast. And for lows tonight, 50 to 55 over the Panhandle, otherwise 45 to 50 for the remainder of southern Alaska, exception being the Kuskokwim Valley, lower 40s there. Highs tomorrow, upper 40s to lower 50s, Kuskokwim Valley, otherwise in the 50s to near 60, especially Kodiak Island, mid-60s, southern Panhandle, mid-50s to the north, and upper 50s for Yakutat and Juneau. Lows the next morning in the 40s, 40 to 50. And for the Panhandle, upper 40s to lower 50s. That'll be followed by highs in the lower to mid-50s, some cases upper 50s, Homer to Kodiak, and mid-50s Bristol Bay. Mid-60s there, maybe even a 67 or 8 over the southern southeast coast, but mid to upper 50s to the north. Up to the north, 30s for the North Slope, Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast, 40s to the south, and the interior temperatures highs 40s out toward the Bering Sea, and then lower to mid-50s toward the east. And for the lows the next morning, upper 30s to mid-40s for the interior south of the Brooks Range, north of the Brooks Range again in the 30s, and then highs the next day, again mid to upper 50s from say Fairbanks over toward Northway, Tok to Eagle, down toward 50 as you head west, mid to upper 40s out over the Bering Strait and Seward Peninsula, lower to mid 40s for the Arctic coast. Out to the southwest, lows tonight in the 40s. Highs tomorrow in the 50s and upper 40s towards St. Lawrence Island, followed by lows either side of 50 for the Aleutians, mid 40s for the Pribilofs, lower to mid 40s for the southwest coast, near 50 for the Alaska Peninsula, 40 for St. Lawrence Island, highs in the 50s the following day, except upper 40s there, St. Lawrence Island and the Seward Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Friday morning, flying weather graphic. North of the Brooks Range, IFR right on out into the Arctic Ocean. And then the Brooks Range itself looks marginal, and then that area, marginal VFR, extends southward across the western interior valleys, becoming IFR there over the Kuskokwim Delta and Bristol Bay into the Aleutian Range. Marginal VFR, south central Alaska, Kuskokwim Valley, and VFR north of the Brooks Range, mid and upper Tanana Valley, and the Yukon Flats. And some IFR over the Wrangell Mountains, a lot of IFR for the North Gulf Coast up to the Coast Range there. Probably not getting in too much into north of the Coast Range, but marginal VFR, Northern Panhandle, VFR to the south. Lots of IFR from the Pribilofs west-southwestward to Amchitka Island and Shimia. And for the afternoon, we've got improving there for the North Slope. Still some IFR clinging to the central Arctic coast, but generally from the Brooks Range on northward, marginal VFR, and then the western interior, marginal IFR along the Alaska Range up to about the Talkeetnas, and southward there, still along the Coast Range up into the eastern Copper River Basin. Still pretty good there in the eastern interior areas, but IFR now over the northern quarter of the Panhandle with VFR, southern half of the southeast coast. Kodiak Island, southwest Shelikof Strait, and the western southwest part of the island, marginal. Togiak Bay and Bristol Bay, some VFR. Widespread IFR now for the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians, including the Pribilofs, St. Lawrence Island, and the Seward Peninsula look marginal. And for the morning hours, areas of VFR scattered over the interior, mostly in the central interior there, and some on the north slope. Cook Inlet as well, maybe the Copper River Basin, also some marginal VFR and IFR scattered around in the southeast interior. And the northern Panhandle, areas of a VFR with some IFR in the over toward the border in the north with scattered areas of VFR. And then for the Bering Sea, areas of IFR as well, otherwise marginal VFR out that way. And for the afternoon, that area of IFR in the Bering Sea kind of gets a little more organized and pushes eastward to the Pribilofs, or through the Pribilofs and up to the southwest coast, Yukon Delta coast, into western Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, and then the IFR zone extending down over the central Aleutians with a frontal boundary. IFR areas of Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast, to about Yakutat, and just some marginal VFR link down Glacier Bay, southeast coast, otherwise looking pretty good, VFR. And the interior not too bad either. Central interior has some marginal VFR from the Yukon River to the western Alaska Range, Talkeetnas, Brooks Range, eastern North Slope. And for Anaktuvuk, marginal VFR, same forecast for Adigan, Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR, rainy, marginal VFR, windy IFR, Isabel, marginal VFR, Mentasta, marginal VFR with VFR north entrance, Tanita improving, hopefully, IFR at times throughout the day. Portage improving with westerly flow kicking in, so the east side will get a little better. And Chilkoot and White, IFR. Looking at the freezing levels, 4,000 feet over the eastern Bering Sea there, down to the eastern Aleutians Alaska Peninsula. 6,000 feet right up Resurrection Bay into the central interior there. And then 12 to 14,000 feet over the Panhandle, and 6,000 to 12,000 feet over the southern Bering Sea, warming up as you head to Shimi and Attu. And for icing, considerable moderate rime icing for the North Gulf Coast into the Copper River Basin, otherwise isolated moderate in the shaded areas over the central interior there into the northern Panhandle, as well as the Pribilofs, eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and then some more icing sliding into the western Aleutians. Jet stream Got a flat ridge out over the Aleutians there, so 100 to 120 knot winds blowing over the top of that, diving southeastward across the Fox Islands, and southwest 125 knots right across Yakutat. 40 to 55 knot winds from the west turning southwest along the North Gulf Coast areas, and 50 to 60 knot winds over the western Aleutians. Looking at 3,000 feet, easterlies 45 knots there right along the eastern Arctic coast, 35 knots on the west side, turn northerly at 35 through the Bering Strait, west 50 there right across Iliamna Lake. Widespread considerable moderate turbulence, surface 6,000 feet, southern Alaska, northern Panhandle, as well as the central and western Aleutians.
Greetings, my favorite star harvesters. September 10th is the official night of the harvest moon, and it will rise at sunset and light up the entire night. This bright moon gave farmers more light to harvest their crops. Hit the skies just after sunset on September 10th and look east. The harvest moon will rise as the sun sets and will have an orange tint. The orange has to do with the components of visible light. When we look at the moon close to the horizon, there's more air between us and the moon. The air scatters more of that moonlight. Red scatters the least, so the moon appears more reddish orange. During a full harvest moon, you experience 12 hours of daylight from the sun and 12 hours of moonlight from the moon. If you watch it set before sunrise, it'll be orange again, as the light it is casting reflects through a thicker atmosphere. Happy harvest, y'all, and keep looking up.
The Yukon Flats National Wildlife Refuge is a refuge in Alaska. It's the third largest refuge in the National Wildlife Refuge System. North of Fairbanks, it's a vast ecosystem of wetlands. What drives this refuge are natural forces of fire, ice, and water.
The Yukon Flats has got a really interesting history. Back in the late 50s, early 1960s, there was a proposal to dam the Yukon River down by Rampart, which is downstream of the Yukon Flats. And it was a hydroelectric proposal. And so in order to assess the merits of that proposal, people got together because they were a little bit concerned about what the impacts might be on the Yukon Flats, the habitat, and all the people living within the Yukon Flats Refuge. There's quite a few people living within the refuge. We have 7 villages. So in order to figure out how special the Yukon Flats was, the Fish and Wildlife Service banded over 40,000 ducks within the Yukon Flats. And using the band return information, they found out that those ducks were using 45 of the 50 lower 48 states. They were using 7 foreign countries, and they were using most of the provinces over in Canada, as well as all the major flyways down in the lower 48. And so that identified that the Yukon Flats was a special breeding area, and that information, along with a lot of other public information that was gathered during that whole process, really ensured that the dam never did go in, and thus the habitat was preserved.
So what that did is it really highlighted the national importance of this area and how important conserving this particular area is for conserving many other natural areas in the lower 48 and even across the continent.
To protect the Yukon Flats Refuge because we have responsibility towards our future generations to leave land protected in the state that it is now. The Yukon Flats is a wild place. The ecosystem is intact and functioning, and you can't find that very many places in the rest of the U.S.
The Yukon Flats Refuge is among the most important places for ducks. So each spring, millions of ducks, and in addition to shorebirds and geese raptors and loons, they all fly to the refuge to nest and rear their young. And the reason they are attracted to this area is because it has really enriched wetlands. There are lots of nutrients in the wetlands that provide a lot of food for the growing young.
We also have a lot of predator, prey species like bears and black bears, grizzly bears, wolves. We also have a lot of moose and fur bearers that use the refuge. So overall, there's just a great diversity of both upland, lowland, and migratory bird species that use the refuge.
Most people know the flats as a duck nursery, and that was one of the main purposes that was designed for, but a lot of recent research over the last decade has really illustrated how important it is to a variety of native endemic fish species for subsistence and recreational and commercial fisheries throughout the entire Yukon River Basin and out to supporting commercial fisheries out to the Bering Sea as well. So it supports a variety of different whitefish and salmon species, the northern pike, a little bit of everything that people rely on as cultural identities, but also for subsistence resources and where people go to recreate and enjoy being outside.
The type of recreation that you're going to find on Yukon Flats Refuge is very primitive. And what that often does is it gives people a complete break from some of the stresses of today's world. There are no cell phone towers out there. There are no roads. There are no trails. So any type of recreation that people have is entirely natural. The lands and waters within the Yukon Flats National Wildlife Refuge are open to the public to enjoy. And that's a really important tenet upon which the United States is built.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And welcome back. Looking at Thursday sea ice analysis. Not much to see here. Got sea ice-free water, the entire stretch of the coastline there on into Mackenzie Bay. So moving on, and it should stay that way for some time. And moving on to the coastal water forecasts, looking like this tomorrow for the south coast of the south coast of the Panhandle. West to southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, seas at about 10 feet. For the north coast, small craft advisory, south winds 30 knots, seas up to 15 feet. And small craft advisories, northern inside channels, southeast winds 25 knots. Stevens Passage, southeast winds 20 knots with higher gusts. And for Clarence Strait, northwest winds at 15 with 3-foot seas. And for the day on Saturday, small craft advisories for the south coast now, northwesterlies at 25 knots. And for the north coast, west winds at 15 knots, seas at about 8 feet. And Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, northern inside waters, south winds 15 knots. And the central and southern inside waters, northwest 10 to 15 knots. Prince William Sound on Friday, south winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Small craft advisories for the North Gulf Coast and Barren Islands for southwest winds up to 30 knots, seas at about 12 feet. Southwest winds 30 knots, also for for Kamishak Bay with 10-foot seas. Cook Inlet has gale warnings out for south to southwest winds 35 knots. Those winds will be south of 20 knots on Saturday for Cook Inlet with 5 to 6 foot seas. Southeast winds 15 knots for Kamishak Bay. Barren Islands south at 20. North Gulf Coast south to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots. Prince William Sound, southeast winds 15 knots. Kodiak Island, gale warnings, Shelikof Strait, otherwise southwest winds 30 knots. For the Alaska Peninsula, west-southwest winds at 30, and gale warnings for Bristol Bay, west winds 30 knots, seas up to 12 feet. For Saturday, Bristol Bay, small craft advisory, south winds 25 knots, small craft advisories for the Alaska Peninsula, southwest 25 knot winds there. And for Kodiak Island, south to southwest winds 20 to 25 knots, seas 5 to 8 feet. For the Aleutians, tomorrow, the entire Aleutian chain, winds will be southwest at 30 knots with 8 to 10 foot seas. And for Saturday, for the central and eastern Aleutians, southwest winds 30 knots. And from Kiska to Shemya, winds will be west at 25 knots. Southwest coast tomorrow, west winds 25 to 30 knots, seas 7 to 10 feet. Highest winds in seas south of Nunivak Island. Pribilof, southwest at 20, seas 7 feet. St. Matthew Island, south winds 15 knots, and then northwest winds at 25 knots for St. Lawrence Island, but south at 20 for Norton Sound. And for Saturday, St. Lawrence Island, Yukon Delta coast, looking at south winds at 20 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas. Small craft advisories for the Kuskokwim Delta coastline there for south winds at 25 knots. Pribilof Islands, small craft advisory, southwest winds 25 knots. Southeast 25 for St. Matthew Island. Up north, eastern and central Arctic coast, small craft advisories, east winds 30 knots, seas up to 11 feet, and then 25 knot winds for the western Arctic coast, turn northeast at 25 from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson to Wales, north winds 25 knots. And looking ahead to Saturday, winds come down there from Wales to Cape Beaufort, northeast down to 15 now, seas 4 to 6 feet. For the remainder of the Arctic coast, pretty uniform direction and speed as well as sea heights. East winds 20 knots, seas 9 to 10 feet. For tonight, that low slowly moves in toward the Kuskokwim Mountains there, center along the Yukon River. And the front slowly pushing eastward. Flood watches out later tonight and tomorrow for the Copper River Basin, Susitna Valley. High wind warning out for the Alaska Range tonight through tomorrow for possible gusts 75 miles an hour. Rain heavy at times for the North Gulf Coast. And for tomorrow, that low kind of splits up there and weakens. Front weakens as it moves into the Panhandle, trying to spread rain to the south but doesn't quite make it. Stays kind of cloudy, wet, and breezy over much of southern and central Alaska, with even a chance of precipitation up to the Arctic coast. Another weak system keeps it wet and unsettled for much of the southern Bering Sea and Aleutians, especially the Pribilofs. And then that next system out to the west pushes a front almost to the southwest coast, doesn't quite make it. Warm front range into the Alaska Peninsula. More showery and mostly cloudy for much of interior Alaska.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.